Thank you very much for coming along. My name's Jason Hayes. I'm the academic lead for the Productivity Forum for Yorkshire, the Humber and the North East. And on behalf of the Forum and the Forum's chair, Sarah Tulip, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to our event on people, technology and productivity. This event's one of a number being held around the country as part of National Productivity Week, which is sponsored by an organisation called the Productivity Institute, which is a nationwide organisation which is funded by the Economic and Social Research Council. That's the major social science funding body in the UK. The Productivity Institute is, I think, the ESRC's biggest ever investment. It's really a forum that brings together academics with business leaders, with policymakers at national and local levels, other key stakeholders, education providers, trade unions, third sector organizations, to talk about the productivity challenges that we face as a country and also at a regional level, at a local level. So it's at different scales. The UK has experienced over a long period of time significant productivity challenges, poor productivity performance, lack of productivity growth. The TPI was set up in recognition of the fact that that challenge is multifaceted and that there are no simple answers. There are different dimensions that need to be addressed, and we need to think about how to connect those dimensions together. So the dimensions that the TPI is primarily focused on are those on the screen: human capital, in other words, investment in skills, knowledge, education, training, knowledge capital, organizational capital, macroeconomic trends and policy, institutions and governance. And there's also a piece around measurement, because we recognize that there are issues just in terms of defining what productivity is in a clear way and measuring productivity with any degree of certainty, particularly in particular parts of the economy, particular sectors. So there are different dimensions to the TPI. TPI is also supported at regional level by productivity forums, of which this is one, the forum that's hosting this event, the Yorkshire, Humber and North East Productivity Forum. There are productivity forums in every part of the country, including Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And those forums work with, or bring together, regional stakeholders to talk about productivity problems that are important in their part of the world. So our forum has been in operation for about 4 years. We have about 32 members from different types of organizations, from policy, from business, from unions, British Business Bank, employer organizations like Make UK. Whole range of stakeholders are involved in coming together to talk about productivity problems, but also how we can address those productivity problems through actionable insights generated through research, which I will talk about in just a moment. We're here because it's National Productivity Week, and the idea of these Productivity Week events is to bring together stakeholders to engage in discussions about local productivity challenges, raise awareness of the importance of productivity, share research evidence and insights, highlight the recommendations of TPI where relevant, highlight the achievements of organizations and share good practices, which is definitely something we want to do today. The aims of today's event then are to examine the implications of AI, digital technologies for productivity skills needs and jobs in Yorkshire, Humber and the North East, and also to discuss how regions can build more robust pathways into work. We've chosen those topics because they're obviously incredibly important, they're incredibly topical, particularly as far as AI is concerned. You can't really escape social media or mainstream press predictions about the destructive effects that AI may have on jobs. There's a very pessimistic take on that, in that we may see very wide-scale job destruction. Some people would argue it's already happening. A counter-argument is that AI, as with other new technologies in the past, will also bring new jobs into being, new skills requirements, and that AI can be used to augment jobs, existing jobs, not just replace jobs. There are also other issues that perhaps we might discuss to do with AI. The skills needs that we need. What's the challenge for education and training providers in Yorkshire, Humber and the North East? How is AI being implemented? what experience do we have of the implementation of AI? How's that gone? What kind of problems have organizations experienced? What kinds of success stories can we speak about? The uses that AI can be put to and how that affects different business functions and how work is performed. And of course, critical for us as part of TPI, the impact on performance and productivity. So that's the first issue, or set of issues. Alongside that, we thought it would be very instructive, very important to talk about pathways into work, because potentially there's a tension there. On the one hand, you've got impetus in relation to AI and the diffusion of new technology and how we respond to that challenge, and the jobs implications of that. But on the other hand, we've got a renewed emphasis on getting people into work, as seen through the Pathways to Work initiative, which Fiona and colleagues will talk about shortly, that was kind of homegrown in Barnsley and is now being rolled out. Keep Britain Working, the Charlie Mayfield review, the review into young people, and NEETS that's being led by Alan Milburn. That's all about connecting people to jobs. But is there a tension there, connecting people to jobs at the same time as jobs are being transformed and maybe in some areas destroyed as a result of technological change? So teasing out the implications of those two imperatives and how they sit together is quite important for today, we think. And there are other issues there as well. Delivering pathways into work and sustainable jobs is going to require cooperation, but by bodies including local authorities, mayoral combined authorities, employers, education providers, third sector organisations, and others. So what roles are those organisations playing? What roles should they play? How can they cooperate better? What good examples are there of practices to support people into jobs and keep them in work? Again, we're going to talk about that for sure, the speakers will. And to discuss these issues, we do have an excellent lineup of speakers and panel members with extensive first-hand experience of these issues. One of the things the forum does, the Yorkshire, Humber and North East Forum, is identify topics for research. And it's not research for the sake of research. It's not like blue skies research. It's research that hopefully has some use value for regional stakeholders like mayoral combined authorities, local authorities, businesses, but national policy as well. And one thing that's come out of that is the report that's on your table, our new report, Training Practices and Skills Needs in Yorkshire, the Humber and North East, which is based on a survey of 521 employers in those regions. The report provides evidence relating to employers' skills needs, recruitment challenges, training activities, involvement in apprenticeship training, and engagement with local employers, local employment and training service providers. We've looked at skills and employers' future skills needs as self-defined by employers. We found that the skills that organisations still regard as most important are foundational skills, such as literacy and numeracy. But more than 1 in 10 of our survey respondents said that their organisation faced difficulties in finding applicants with adequate literacy or numeracy skills. 1 in 10 having difficulties finding people with the most basic types of skills, which points to continuing weaknesses in the availability of basic skills within our regional economy. More than 90% of organisations provided at least one form of training, and that's positive, that's a positive finding, but it's most often very informal, unaccredited, informal on-the-job training. And 1/5 of organisations in the survey had not provided any employees at all with any time off for training in the 12 months prior to the survey. Large organisations are more likely to do it than small organisations, which is in line with what we already know and is unsurprising, but it's still a significant finding. Also important, given the number of people in non-standard, in other words, fixed-term, temporary or part-time jobs, also important is the fact that employees with non-standard contracts receive less training than employees with standard contracts. In other words, those in full-time jobs with an open-ended contract. With regard to apprentices, we found numerous things that I think are relevant in terms of apprenticeships. But one thing I want to pull out that perhaps is important for the pathways to work dimension of what we're talking about today is that although there's a lot of talk about young people not having the right motivation, not being oven ready when they leave university, or further education, not being oven ready for employment, fewer than 1 in 10 organisations that did not employ an apprentice said that it was because of concerns about apprentices' attitudes or work commitment. So those concerns around apprentices or young people perhaps not having the right kind of attitudes or motivation were actually not that important in our survey. Not to say that some organisations did not recognise those as being important, recognise that as being important, but it certainly wasn't the thing that they focused on. And finally, with regard to technology, just to say, as it says on the slide, more than 2/5 of organisations had introduced at least one advanced digital technology in the past 3 years, so diffusion is widespread and it's rapid. Adoption was most common among organisations that faced relatively high levels of competition, which we thought was interesting. We also find, and make of this what you will, organisations that had introduced advanced digital technologies were more likely than those that had not to reduce the size of their workforce. Importantly, we cannot say, because it's association rather than causation, we cannot say that those organisations were replacing people with technology. That we cannot say. But what we can say is that organisations that were introducing AI technology were more likely than those that were not to be losing staff. We find that AI is more often being used to support relatively low-level tasks, such as data recording, summarizing information, and proofreading. So although it's widely used, our evidence tends to suggest it's still mainly used in terms of lower-level kind of activities, lower-level skill content jobs.